Hello, good afternoon. My name is Wouter van Giluwe. Welcome at this Tech Academy session. I'm Adobe's CTO in Western Europe, and I'll be hosting today's session together with Jithin Kumar from DNB. Jithin is an architect and they are currently implementing Adobe Experience Platform. And so Jithin will help us understand what they are currently building and how it is linked to the topic of today, which is connecting your call center to Adobe Experience Platform. This session is the first one in 2023, but we've been hosting Tech Academy sessions for the last 3 years. So there's a series of events scheduled. The next event is on February 28th, which will be very interesting and focused on the architecture of Adobe Experience Cloud, and will showcase a comparison of the old versus the new setup. And then on March 28th, we'll focus on server-side forwarding of event data. So if you're interested, feel free to sign up. And you'll also find all of the recordings of past and future Tech Academy sessions on our YouTube channel. You've got the QR codes on the screen, so feel free to go there and check it out. There's a couple of interesting videos there about architecture of the platform. You'll find demo videos and overall quite a lot of inspiring content to help you understand how customer experiences can and should evolve into your organization. But let's focus on the topic today. So customer experiences, one-to-one experiences, I think is top of mind for all of you. If you're connecting to today's session, you'll be interested in knowing how to connect a service environment to the rest of your ecosystem. And well, I think it's crucial to take into account the call center into the holistic customer experience of your organization, and basically connect sales to marketing and to service. All too often we can see that marketing and as an example, on-site personalization or off-site personalization on channels like Facebook or Twitter or LinkedIn, etc., is not connected to the service environment. That basically leads to a very disconnected experience. Unfortunately, not many brands have already connected their service environment to the rest of the organization, as it's really a no-brainer and should be connected as soon as possible, because you are unable to deliver an omni-channel, real-time, consistent and contextual customer experience if those sales, marketing, and service environments aren't properly connected to each other. Most brands, as I was saying before, are unable to connect them, which leads to a very negative customer experience. I know everybody is very much focused on selling new products to customers or upselling to current customers, but how can you justify continuously sharing sell kind of communication to customers who may have had a negative experience in a different environment? As an example, myself, I had a call with my telco in Belgium last week. It wasn't that positive, but nevertheless, I was receiving communication over email quite quickly after that conversation to try and sell me something additional. So how can you justify doing that? How can you justify trying to sell something to a customer who obviously is not in the right state of mind to even consider purchasing anything? And in the end, this is how it looks like: continuous pop-ups, emails, messages, communication to buy something new without having properly figured out the basics of customer experience, which means connecting acquisition to retention, connecting the whole customer journey to each other, and being able to also understand and analyze what happens where and how it influences purchasing behavior of your customer. That's the topic of today. Tech Academy, so that means we'll be going a bit deeper and showcasing to you a couple of interesting concepts. And to do so, we'd like to focus on 2 approaches. There's a productized integration that exists today already with service platforms like ServiceNow, Genesys, and a couple of others as well. So that's the first topic of today. We'll focus on how those work, and I'll showcase the integration and the architecture behind those setups. And then as a second topic of today's presentation, we'll focus on building a custom application on top of Adobe Experience Platform, which is what Jithin has done at DNB. So they've basically implemented as a POC the APIs of the platform in their AWS environment. And Jithin will show you what they've done, why they've done it, and how it will help DNB to deliver a more personal customer service. Anyway, the first demonstration I wanted to give to you is focused on the ServiceNow integration. So behind me, you can see the website of a fictitious telco, which is called City Signal. City Signal is currently being browsed by an unknown anonymous customer, which is router. You can see that my behavior on the website is being collected in real time and is becoming part of my customer profile on this X-ray panel in real time. Besides my event data, you're now seeing my profile data also being attached to that same profile inside the platform. And so basically, I'm now a known customer with an email address, with a mobile phone number. I'm logged in. My event data is connected to myself. The fact that I'm a known customer also means that I could churn. So in this case, in this demo environment, we've connected Adobe Experience Platform to a third-party machine learning platform, which is basically updating the churn score of this customer in real time. So as I move forward in my customer journey, at some point I might decide to cancel my contract, to cancel my service with this with City Signal. So the fact that I'm going to this product page is collected in real time by Adobe Experience Platform. It is shared in real time to the third-party machine learning platform, which updates in real time my churn score. And based on that churn score, again, there's a very powerful signal that should be used by City Signal to influence how they communicate with me going forward. Now, if I decide to pick up my phone and basically call the call center of City Signal, this is what happens in the background. So the call center agent is basically answering my phone call, and will be creating a case inside ServiceNow. So this is what you're seeing. I'm being identified as a customer. They're starting a case using the topic of my call, which is issues with Wi-Fi connection, and the fact that I'm not really happy about that problem. And by creating this case, they're basically now starting that conversation with me. And what you're seeing here in the middle of the screen is customer insights from AEP widget, which is basically loading information from Adobe Experience Platform in real time. By doing so, the customer service agent has more information about who I am, about my past, and my likelihood to churn, but also the interest I may have in other products, and so on. So by showcasing this, the call center agent has the ability to have a better informed conversation with me, but also very importantly, after that conversation, the feedback of that discussion should be sent back into the rest of the organization. So an organization should have a brain for communication and orchestration, a single brain, and that should be, from our perspective, Adobe Experience Platform. So this interaction, this event of the call in the call center is sent in real time from ServiceNow back into Adobe Experience Platform, where it can be used again in real time to trigger communication to customers. So what you're seeing here on the screen is a SMS text message being sent to me by Adobe Journey Optimizer, alongside an email being sent by Journey Optimizer as well, in real time, triggered based off of my interaction in the ServiceNow contact center. At the same time, you can now see that this customer record updated. So my churn score has become 78%, used to be 52. So based on my negative interaction with the call center agents, that event has led to a new churn score being calculated by a third-party machine learning platform and updating that in real time again in the platform of Adobe. for activation, communication, and orchestration. So this is one way of connecting ServiceNow to Adobe Experience Platform. Obviously, there are more platforms in the market than ServiceNow, and you as an organization should have the flexibility and freedom to choose whichever platform you decide to work with. So this same customer journey demonstration exists in different contexts. Secure Financial is a fictitious banking company, and the same story is available on this website, whereby an unknown customer is browsing that Secure Financial website. After a couple of clicks, this customer will showcase an interest in, will identify and will show an interest in the mortgage loan product. And after that interest in that specific product, you'll see that on the next screen, there will be a pop-up, which, sorry, I'm going too fast, which is a pop-up that showcases this live chat window powered by Genesys, which is triggered in real time based off of the interaction with the website and interest in that specific product. So when the customer starts this chat with Genesys, you can see that in the backend system in Genesys itself, that communication becomes visible, and every interaction, every issue, every case that's being created in this context is basically informed and shared with Adobe Experience Platform again. So AEP is providing information to Genesys, and Genesys is writing back information into Adobe Experience Platform as well in the form of an event, which you can see pop up in this list above me as well. So again, bidirectional communication in a productized way with Genesys is one way of implementing this into your own environment. And obviously, the feedback from Genesys should then lead again to an updated customer journey. And if a customer has had a specific interaction, that should influence immediately what other communication is shared with the same customer on other channels. That's in a nutshell what ServiceNow and Genesys are doing currently in combination with Adobe Experience Platform. I will share in the chat in a couple of minutes a couple of links to the YouTube channel whereby you can see more detailed videos on this specific integration. And obviously the next step is to talk a bit about the architecture here. So let me my screen. You can see behind me, this is an architecture drawing of the whole Adobe Experience Platform ecosystem. Again, there's a video which showcases and explains every element, but I wanted to focus on that specific use case that we just referred to. So this is the Adobe Experience Platform data center location. So in there, you've got a profile and a data lake. So obviously, all of this communication is focused on customers. So what we do here is interact with the profile, the real-time customer profile of Adobe Experience Platform. And you can see this beautiful icon here of a call center agent who basically speaks to the platform and basically collects information from the profile API. So when ServiceNow is showcasing information from a customer from Adobe Experience Platform in their own UI, they basically have sent a request to the profile API of the platform, and they have received feedback. So this flow here, these arrows, when the case is started, we send a request to the profile API, and the profile API then responds with up-to-date customer information immediately. So this is step one in that implementation, allowing the service agent environment to request information from the profile API and showcase it to the service agent in a friendly manner. But the second step in this process is also the feedback loop. So when the call has ended, when the conversation has ended, a event should be sent by the call center back into Adobe Experience Platform. And that should happen in real time. So the way to do that properly is by connecting the call center to the Adobe Edge, whereby at the end of the conversation, an experience event is sent by the call center application to the edge, which then leads to offers at the edge being recalculated, but also potentially segments being qualified, personalization to Adobe Target that changes, and any other downstream activation to channels like DSPs or Facebook or LinkedIn and Twitter should happen as a consequence of that specific integration with the call center. So that there are two steps. You've got this one. This is step one of showcasing information from Adobe in the call center. And then the second step is ingesting event data after a conversation with the customer back into the edge of Adobe, so that future communication can be updated in real time based on that offline interaction. You see me reference the Profile API a number of times in this conversation. APIs aren't the most sexy topic to discuss or to show, but I just wanted to quickly highlight the technical side of this integration. So you're seeing Postman behind me. That's an application to test and develop API integrations. To speak to the Adobe Profile API, we basically go through Adobe I/O. Adobe I/O is Adobe's gateway so that you can speak to the APIs in an authenticated way. The first step to do is to authenticate and basically generate a JSON web token, which is what we are doing here. So you can see references to client IDs, secrets, and so on. By sending my request, I'm basically getting a response from Adobe I/O, and this is my valid access token, which is valid for the next 24 hours. So that means in the next 24 hours, this Postman implementation can request data from the platform in Adobe. And then the second step is to really speak to the Profile API and basically collect that information. That's possible by going into this API library, which I'll share after the call, part of the follow-up email. In this case, I'm using an ECID to identify the customer in the API, but any other identifier can be used, like an email address or a customer CRM ID, mobile phone number, and so on. By clicking the send button, I'll basically collect data from Adobe Experience Platform in a JSON-based way. So this response contains the representation of my customer profile inside the platform of Adobe. So you can see things like my favorite color or my favorite shirt size. You can see my various identification, my various IDs, and also any other personal information that exists of me inside the platform. This is the profile attributes response, which gives me my state of profile in this instance. But to understand why a customer is calling the call center and what they have done up to the last millisecond before calling you, you basically need a bit more. So you also need event data in that process. In this case, I'm not using my ECID to collect my information, but I'm using my email address. And well, by sending this request, the response I'm getting contains my page views on the website. It contains the fact that I received an email or opened an email, and all of these events over here. There's I think 7 events currently, so 7 events have been responded. All of these showcase my path as a customer prior to calling the call center. So that's really helpful to understand what this customer was doing just before calling the call center, as it may also help the service agents to guide the conversation in a specific direction. If I take the example of my churn score from the ServiceNow example, if a customer is calling the call center and you already know that they are at risk for churning, then let me ask you the question, should this customer wait in the line for 30 minutes? Or do you want to speak to the customer immediately and give them the feeling that they are a valued customer who you can speak to immediately? So option A, have them wait in line half an hour. Option B, speak to them immediately and to try and win them back. think we all know the answer here. We need to identify that churn behavior as fast as possible, and then also prioritize this customer's waiting time in the waiting line. So with this integration, you can connect your IVR system, so the robot voice, which is asking you to push one for English and appuyez deux pour français. And while the customer is pushing those buttons on the IVR system, you can retrieve the information from the platform, show this, use what you see behind me in the system to identify if this customer needs attention immediately or if it's okay to have them wait for a couple of minutes in the call center, and then prioritize actually their call by sending them to a call taker as fast as possible. These use cases are made possible thanks to this integration, and well, I think they are a no-brainer from a customer experience perspective. Before we go to Jithin, who will show you how this API has been implemented in real life, I just wanted to push a couple of questions to you. Just activate the poll. The first poll question is, does your call center team have visibility on what the customer did on the website or app in real time before calling the call center? If you could click the answer from your perspective, and then we will end the poll in 30 seconds or so. Not seeing any answers come in. Okay, we only have a couple of votes. The majority is basically saying no, so 75% of respondents answered that no, the call center is not connected to the rest of the customer experience currently. So that's definitely something that should change. But anyway, let's have a look at how Jithin and DNB are currently thinking about this and implement. Jithin, are you there?
Yes, I hope you can hear me.
We can hear you just fine.
Oh, yeah.
I will stop sharing. Over to you.
Yeah, sure. All right. So first of all, I would like to start a little bit about this project. So at DNB, we always strive to provide a great customer experience in all our channels. In order to achieve this, we put technology at the center of all our initiatives and also do data-driven decision-making, which we think makes us efficient in our day-to-day. So in this project, the original idea was to develop a visualization of the real-time customer profile with other associated information as well, with the vision to empower our customer service channels by providing insights into omni-channel behavior of the customers, along with other information such as product ownership, consents, etc. So when the customers reach out to us, we have all the information in order to help and advise our customers in a better way. So this is where we identify Adobe Experience Platform capabilities and the API first delivery model as a good fit for our needs. So as AEP build a unified profile of the customer by stitching together the profile data and the event data and make it available for querying, we were able to combine the platform's interactive Edge API along with the Hub APIs and aggregate the responses, which will be used by the web application that I'm going to show today. So by creating this integration, we were actually able to bring in a lot of useful information from the platform to our man channel, which will help us bring in distributed data together at one place. So the solution that I'm going to show you today essentially has three parts. The first one is the web application itself, which the customer, the call center person is using. And the second part is an API gateway layer that we built in AWS with integrations towards Adobe Experience Platform. And the third part, of course, is the platform itself. So in a bigger picture, this UI application will be integrated into the customer service solution in DNB, so that when there's a call from a customer, it'll be routed to a customer call center personnel, and then this integrated web application will opens up and make an automated search to retrieve the customer profile. And this API will also be used by other channels in DNB, like mobile, web, and so on. So with that, I can move into a little bit into how the solution looks like. I'll start sharing my screen. So I hope you can see my screen. So as I said, like this application essentially have three components, which is the web application itself, which is an authenticated solution. So organizations basically have the employees in Active Directory. So there will be an authentication to access this application in the call center systems. And then we have the API layer that will be built in AWS, and we are using AWS AppSync. So basically, our API in AWS is a GraphQL API. And on the left in the AWS box, you see AWS Amplify. That is basically the hosting solution we are using to host the single page web application. And then from our API gateway layer, we have created API integration to Adobe Experience Platform. So basically, we are making calls to several APIs. As you can see from this diagram, we are using the Edge API, which basically goes to the Edge network of Adobe Experience Platform. And then we are using the Hub APIs, which basically uses an Adobe I/O endpoint. So I'll show in a moment like how these APIs come together and like how they retrieve the data and how we are doing the authorization and authentication to make these calls happen. And internally, we are basically fetching data from different modules in the platform, like we are fetching the offers from offer decisioning, and then we are fetching some information from Adobe Journey Optimizer, like the emails that has been sent to the customer. And also we are fetching some information about the segments and so on. So I'll also show one more slide where it's a bit magnified view of the API, but it's a bit simplified diagram because I'm not going too much into the internal workings of AppSync here, but just to make the request value chain a bit more clear. So on the left, we have web user interface, which will basically make GraphQL API calls to our AppSync endpoint. And AppSync, which is our kind of API gateway, where we have a schema, which is the schema is actually defining the API contract for our backend API. And then the request will further be transferred into a pipeline, a data resolving pipeline. So in a data resolving pipeline, it's basically a combination of several data resolvers, which will be executed in sequence by AppSync. So when a request lands in AppSync, the pipeline is invoked, and then the first resolver that will be invoked is the token resolver. Because as Walter was showing in the Postman scripts, so the first step to make any API calls to the platform is to generate the access token. So token resolver is basically responsible for generating the access token. And the token resolver is actually connected to, so basically resolver is an AppSync concept or AppSync construct, which basically connects to one of the data sources. The data sources can be Lambda function, it can be DynamoDB, it can be third-party API or anything. In our case, it is a Lambda function that actually does the job of receiving the request and then also generating the access token and providing it back. So this resolver will basically generate an access token by connecting with the Lambda function. This Lambda function again goes to Adobe I/O and Adobe I/O access token endpoint and generates the token and retrieve it. So as I said, like it's a sequence of resolvers that being invoked. The next one is the data resolver, which is actually making the API calls to the Adobe Experience Platform. Here, it's a good idea to have separate the data into different resolvers as well. Like for example, we have cacheable data, like profile data of the customer, product ownership, and so on, which can be cached for a long time. We also have more dynamic data like the real-time events or the next best offer and so on. So it's a good idea to separate that in the resolver so that you can cache it in a more optimized way. But for this demo, I'm not going to show in detail of that. But again, so the second resolver will receive the output of the first resolver, which is basically the access token. And then again, it will invoke a Lambda function, which is basically doing all the orchestration to Adobe Edge and Adobe I/O to fetch the data that we need for the web app, and then pass it in as a final response to the web user interface. So this is a kind of overview. I think that makes sense to you. I can show you how this application looks like. So as I said, like this is hosted out of Amplify. So this will be now to showcase. This is basically where customer center personnel will execute a search with one of the identity parameters. It could be email, it could be mobile number, it could be your own identifier. But here for this demo, I'm trying to do a search with mobile number. So basically, this will make a request to our AppSync backend. And then from there, it will go to Adobe Experience Platform and fetch all this information. So here, if you can see, this happens in real time when customer center receives a call. So so we are actually preparing all this information that is required for the customer center personnel to be more efficient in that conversation when the call is arriving. So here you can see that there are some information about the customer, like the reward programs, product ownership, the consent, the email age, and so on. And then if you take a look at the second one, you can see the segments that customer has been qualified for, and then the events, the real-time events, basically like when customer is calling us, like we know like what are the latest 10 activities that customer was doing, or what are the latest interactions that we had with the customer in our different channels. So this is where we provide that omni-channel view. So we are actually experimenting with several visualization of this. So this is one visualization, which is a timeline. But we are also trying to do some experiments with the dashboard, which I'll try to show later, where instead of using tabs, we try to visualize everything together in a dashboard view. So here, we also try to provide a preview of the emails or preview of the offers that the customer received. And also, whether the customer has accepted certain offers in one of our channels or not, and so on. And then right now, I'm not qualified for any offers, so this tab will more or less be empty. But usually, my next best offer will come up here, and then we are visualizing it like this. So when there's a call, and in that conversation, if the customer the call center personnel can see like what is the next best offer that can be proposed to the customer. And once customer is interested in that offer, then from this user interface itself, the call center personnel can actually accept or reject the offer, so that it's basically registered in the platform, and any promotions related to this offer can be removed from all other digital channels. So that we don't propose the same offers again, and so on, for example. So we can come back to this user interface a little bit later. I can show you the API and a little bit on the deep dive into the code and the stack that we are using for the API. Let me share the screen. So I hope you can see my screen where we have the GraphQL schema. This is where we have, so this is a temporary GraphQL schema which actually is powering this web application. So this is all the information that we are sending back to the user interface to be able to show this information or to visualize this information. So as I said, like this API is not just used by this application. This is one of the channels where this API is consumed. So there are other channels in DNB that might use this API in order to get personalized offer in real time at any point. So yeah, so you can see the data model is nothing but it's a mirror of this user interface. You can see that we have some classes or some types that shows the digital events, the email events, the event metadata, the offers, and so on. So as I said, like AppSync basically connects, basically executes a pipeline. So you can see on the left side, right side, we have a resolver. So here, so this will basically the resolver to execute the guest customer profile. And then this query will take in the parameter of the user ID, of mobile number, or whatever identity parameters you want to make a search on. And then it will hand over to the Lambda functions, which is in the sequence. So here you can see in this pipeline, I have two Lambda functions as is shown in the slide. The first one is a token generator Lambda function, and then an AEP data fetch Lambda function. So here, there are some templates that's being used, which is basically to do request and response transformation. So once you receive a request in AppSync, you can apply some transformation, or you can pass in the request as such to the Lambda function with some arguments. And then the Lambda function will receive that parameters that is coming from the user interface all the way, and then execute the logic, and then return the response. And you can also apply some response transformation or do error handling or whatever you want to do here. So with that, I think I'll go a bit into the source code of how this is. So now I'm not showing the source code of the UA application. Instead, I'll try to show the API stack. So I hope you can see it properly. So this is our CDK stack, which is the cloud development kit, AWS stack. So we create our infrastructure as a general practice. We create our infrastructure as code, and here you can see that we are using TypeScript to build our infrastructure. So here, the important components, as I said, like we are creating an API, and then you can choose what kind of authorization or authentication you want for this API. So AppSync gives you the flexibility to. So this is where the significance of multiple channels accessing the same API comes in, because for example, with this call center use case, with this call center web UI, it might be doing a certain kind of authorization against this API, whereas a mobile bank or web application is doing a completely different type of authentication, because one or some channels are for customers and some channels are for in DNB internal. So then AppSync provides this flexibility to give you, to basically do the necessary authentication you want for each channel. So this is where we're building the API, and then of course, yes, you know, like we have some roles and so on, which manage the permissions internally. So some of the data here is basically dummy values, which I prepared for this talk. So we have a Lambda function and we have an authorization Lambda. So we have two Lambda functions, and the authorization Lambda is basically using some of the environment parameters. So this is the structure of each of these fields, but these are not the actual values. So basically, we need some information from Adobe Platform, which you can. So there is an extensive documentation on how you can generate a token, access token, from the Adobe Platform in Adobe website, Adobe documentation site. But in a nutshell, you need some information, some parameters that you need to pass when you make a request to the token endpoint. You can see that we have the token, the Lambda functions that are created as data sources. And then we have the GraphQL schema, which is another construct in CDK where we define schema. This can be also done in a file. So basically, once the schema grows big, it's a best practice to have it in a file. And then we have the configurations for these Lambda functions, and then the request and response mapping templates, which again can be in the file. And also, this is where the resolvers tie all these functions together and execute this in a sequence. So you can see that we have a resolver where we have two functions in the pipeline configuration that will be executed in sequence. And then we have the request and response mapping template, and also what query this resolver is going to perform, and what kind of results or what kind of data transformation we need to do. So this is our CDK stack, which is basically responsible for repeatably creating the AWS infrastructure that we need for our API gateway, and also for our hosting the web application. So with that, I can go a little bit into the Lambda authorization function. So here on the left side, you can see that I'm basically using two Lambda functions. The first one is the auth function. So again, here, as I said, what we are doing is basically we are making a request to the Adobe's access token endpoint, access token exchange endpoint. This is this. And then in order to generate token, you need to have a private key, you need to have the secret, and then you need to basically sign the payload, and also and then you will basically retrieve a GRWT token, which you will exchange with the token endpoint for the access token. So the output of this Lambda function is basically the access token that will be used in the next Lambda function to make the API call. So here you can choose any secret manager solution, basically to put store all the secrets in. So here we are using AWS Secrets Manager, and then you can see that we are, as a first step, we are retrieving the private key, and then also the other parameters. Some of these parameters, as I shown in the CDK stack, are environment variables, which are basically injected at runtime, and then some of the parameters are retrieved from the Secrets Manager, which are more sensitive, and then you can use basically any token library with JSON Web Token Handling library to sign your payload, and then make get an access token. Here we are using JSON Web Token, but you can essentially use any library for that. So once we have the access token, then the next Lambda function in the sequence will be invoked, which is this one. And here you can see that we are making multiple API requests, again from the main thread. So the first one is, so as I pointed out in the slide, it is not so this is basically not a production ready solution yet. So we are basically exploring different capabilities of the platform, different APIs. We are testing out things and so on. So once we will be deploying this to production, we need to refactor these API calls and into different resolvers, as I pointed out in the slide, so that you can make this request value chain more efficiently. Because now you can see that all these calls are made synchronously from this Lambda function, which is not the best practice. And because we all don't need all this data every time. We can, for example, the profile attributes we can cache for a long time. Only the dynamic parameters are basically the next best offers and the events, and maybe segment definitions as well. But once you separate this into different Lambda functions or different resolvers, based on how you want to define your architecture, you can basically separate this into different. But for this presentation, I'm just showing this synchronous way of doing it. So here, again, you can use an HTTP library to make a request to Adobe's. So here, I will. So we have a call to get the real-time profile. We have a call to get the events. We have a call to get the offers, and we have to go to get segment definitions. Before I go into that, I also want to mention one thing, that the token that you, so as I said, like in AppSync, this resolvers will be executed in sequence. So the first resolver, which is a token generation, which will be executed as the first step. But this does not happen all the time, or this does not have to happen all the time, because we can cache this token for 24 hours, as Walter said. We can enable caching for one of the resolvers or as many resolvers as we want. And then we can cache this token for 24 hours so that this Lambda function is not at all invoked in that value chain, which saves us some time in total request latency. So basically, AppSync will pass the cached access token to the Lambda function, second Lambda function, and it will execute the API calls based on using that access token. It's also possible to cache any of this API response if you think it's relevant by separating it into different resolvers. But here we have retrieved the explorer, so I'm not going deep into these parameters. So you can actually document them in the API documentation. So you can basically pass what entity ID and what kind of identity parameters you want into the request. And then, so real-time profile and events, these are almost same APIs, but here, as I said, like in with the vision to separate this data into cacheable and non-cacheable, we have separated it for now, but we are still working on this at this point. So you can essentially get all this information in just one API call, because both are same APIs. It's only thing is that the schema name and the other parameters that you pass into these APIs are the different parameters that decides the response. And for retrieving the offers, you can use your identity parameters and the access token. And then basically, once you receive all this information, so here there's another thing. So as you can assume that the information coming from the profile API will give you information about your profile attributes, the events, also your segment membership. But it might not always have all the information, all the metadata about the segments. But Adobe has other APIs which can provide that. So basically, you need to have some kind of orchestration into different APIs to retrieve all the information and then transform it into the way you want for your channels. So here you can see that we are getting the segment membership from the real-time profile, and then profile attributes also. But to find the segment name or the segment description of a qualified profile as displayed in the user interface, we need to get the segment definitions, which is a different API. So basically, once we get the segment definitions and the segment membership from two different APIs, we can find the qualified segments, the name, description, and so on. And then we can provide it into the channel. Again, since multiple channels are accessing the same API, our customer channels may not or may need this information. So we can avoid this API calls if we orchestrate it in such a way. And then we'll get the next best offers. That is in real time using the Adobe Interactive Edge API, which basically so this is a bit special API, which is an interactive API. It's the same API into which you can post events and also get your offer decision executed in real time and get the next best offer for the customer. So it means that when customer enters the channel, let's say mobile, and they open the application, we can post an event to Adobe Experience Platform saying that, okay, customer has entered the channel, and this is an event that goes to the platform, and this will be executed in real time at Edge. And then the next best offer will be computed in real time and will be returned back to the channel, which can be presented. So that is this API. So this is, I think I have tried to separate it in the slide here. You can see that this one call is going to the Edge, which is the Edge API, which is an interactive API, which gives information about the real-time customer profile and also the offers and everything which customer is eligible for. And also on the other side here, you can see that the other APIs are going to Adobe I/O. I think yeah, exactly. And then you can do whatever data transformation you want on this responses from Adobe Experience Platform, and then you can shape the data accordingly the way you want. So here I have written several types that will support in shaping up this data into the way we want for this channel, and then it will vary, depends upon the channel that the request is coming from. All right, I think I have tried to cover it, most of it. So if you have any questions, yeah.
Thanks a lot, Jithin, for your explanation. Let's see if there are any questions in the event chat or the Q&A. Let's maybe wait for 30 seconds. I haven't seen anything yet so far. It was great seeing that, and it's great to see it come to life and to hear you talk about your thinking about it, what you're testing, how you're implementing it. Especially, I think the discussion on the caching, what data needs to be fresh always, what data can be understood in a different way is quite useful for many organizations. So yeah, overall, thank you for your input here. I don't see any questions in the chat at this moment, so I propose we finish that. So thanks again for your time, Jithin. It was great working with you in the last couple of months to get to this point. Thank you everybody for dialing in today. The recording of this event will be posted on the YouTube channel later today as well, so you can share it with your colleagues. And well, I hope to see you again in 4 weeks from now for our future session on the AEC architecture, old versus new. Thanks a lot, and have a great day. Bye-bye.
Thanks for having us, Wouter. Thank you. Have a good day.
Bye-bye.
Everyone. Bye.